There are moments when the world seems to require almost nothing. A lake before sunrise can appear this way. The surface is not perfectly motionless. Tiny movements travel across it, too small to become waves, and the reflection of the pale sky shifts almost invisibly. Somewhere beyond the water, air moves through grass. A distant bird may call once and then become quiet again. Nothing has stopped. The water is still moving. The air is still circulating. The brain of anyone standing nearby would still be processing light, sound, memory, temperature, balance, and thought. And yet the moment can feel peaceful. From a scientific perspective, this distinction matters, because peace is not the same thing as complete stillness. It is not a silent brain, an empty mind, or a body in which every system has become inactive. Human beings remain biologically busy even in their quietest moments. Peace seems to have more to do with what all that activity is being asked to accomplish. Much of the brain's ordinary work involves prediction. Neural systems are continuously estimating what is happening, what might happen next, and whether anything deserves attention. A sound in another room, a change in someone's expression, an unfinished plan, an unexpected message, or even a thought about tomorrow can briefly become important because the brain is designed to notice changes that might matter. This monitoring is useful. An organism that ignored every change in its surroundings would not function very well. Human perception therefore gives unusual events, uncertain events, and unresolved events a certain priority. Attention is repeatedly drawn toward information that may require a decision. Peace begins to become possible when this priority system has relatively little urgent work to do. This does not mean that every uncertainty has disappeared. There may still be unanswered questions. There may still be tasks waiting somewhere beyond the present moment. Thoughts may continue to appear, but they are not all being marked as requiring an immediate response. In this sense, inner peace can be understood partly as a reduction in urgency. The distinction separates peace from several nearby states. Calm often refers more specifically to low physiological and emotional arousal. A calm body may have a slower heart rate, easier breathing, and less muscular preparation for action. Peace may include those changes, but it is broader. Someone can be physically calm while still mentally debating an unresolved decision. Safety is also related, but different. Safety concerns the perception that significant danger is absent or manageable. Feeling safe creates important conditions for peace. Yet the absence of danger does not automatically produce tranquility. A person sitting in a completely protected room can still be thinking intensely about something unfinished. Silence concerns sound. Comfort concerns pleasant bodily and environmental conditions. Familiarity concerns recognition and predictability. Peace can borrow something from all of them without being identical to any one of them. Perhaps its most useful scientific description is a temporary state in which the person and the present moment are not strongly competing with one another. The brain is not trying very hard to escape what is happening, replace it, complete it, defend against it, or force it into another form. That state may sound simple, but the nervous system does not always enter it immediately. When a period of effort ends, the body does not contain a switch that instantly changes every system from readiness to rest. Stress-related physiological processes unfold over time. Heart rate, muscle tone, hormonal activity, attention, and patterns of thought can continue reflecting earlier demands even after those demands have disappeared. This is one reason an apparently peaceful environment may not feel peaceful at first. Imagine a quiet room late in the evening. The light is dim. The temperature is steady. Outside, a small amount of rain touches the roof with a repetitive sound. No new information is arriving. The surroundings are simple, but the brain may still be carrying momentum from the hours before. A conversation might replay briefly. A task may return to awareness. A decision that has not been made may present itself again, as though it has been waiting for the room to become quiet enough to be noticed. Psychologists have long studied the tendency of unfinished goals to remain mentally accessible. The term Zeigarnik effect is often used for the observation that incomplete tasks can sometimes be remembered or revisited more readily than completed ones. Although the size and reliability of this effect depend on context and experimental conditions, the broader principle is easy to recognize. An unfinished goal can remain a kind of open question for the predictive brain. Is there something more to do? Is a decision still required? Has a situation been resolved? When the answer remains uncertain, attention may return to it. This does not necessarily mean that anything is wrong. It reflects one of the ordinary functions of cognition, keeping potentially relevant information available until it is no longer useful. Peace often appears when these open loops lose some of their immediate importance. Sometimes the external problem has genuinely been completed. Sometimes a decision has been made even though its eventual outcome remains unknown, and sometimes nothing outside has changed at all. Instead, the brain has stopped treating the unresolved issue as something that must be processed during this particular moment. That difference is subtle. A thought can remain present without becoming a command. An emotion can exist without becoming a problem that requires instant correction. A question can remain unanswered without occupying the entire field of attention. This is one reason genuine peace is different from emotional numbness or avoidance. Numbness involves a reduced experience of emotion. Avoidance involves moving away from something because encountering it feels difficult or unwanted. Peace does not require either of these. A peaceful mind can contain sadness, uncertainty, memory, or mild discomfort. What changes is the relationship to those experiences. They no longer produce the same degree of struggle over what must happen next. Research on thought suppression helps illustrate why this matters. Deliberately trying not to think about something can sometimes keep attention oriented toward the very thought being suppressed. To check whether a thought has disappeared, the mind must continue monitoring for it. The effort to remove the thought can therefore become another form of mental work. Peace may involve less of this monitoring. Thoughts still arrive, but not every arrival starts a negotiation. Outside the quiet room, the rain continues with small variations. No two drops produce exactly the same sound, yet the overall pattern remains stable enough to become predictable. Predictability matters because unpredictable changes attract attention. When sensory information remains gentle and continuous, the brain can often reduce the amount of effort devoted to evaluating each event separately. A steady sound can become background. A familiar shadow can remain a shadow, rather than becoming something to inspect. The world is still being perceived. It simply demands fewer decisions. And when fewer things seem to require an answer, the mind can remain awake while becoming a little less watchful. The first pale hint of morning over a still lake contains the same quiet principle. Movement continues. Thought continues. Life continues. But for a while, very little appears to require immediate action. When immediate action is no longer necessary, attention can begin to change its shape. During periods of high demand, attention often becomes narrow. The brain selects what seems most relevant and gives it priority. A deadline, a difficult calculation, an uncertain result, or a rapidly changing environment can pull perception toward a small number of important signals. This narrowing is useful. It helps organize behavior around a goal. But peace usually involves a different arrangement. When nothing seems especially urgent, attention can become broader and softer. Instead of repeatedly asking what matters most right now, the brain can allow more of the environment to exist at the edges of awareness. A distant sound remains distant. A shadow on the wall does not require interpretation. The movement of clouds can be noticed without becoming a problem to solve. Researchers who study attention sometimes distinguish between effortful, directed attention and more effortless forms of engagement. Directed attention is valuable, but it is limited. Holding a goal in mind, ignoring distractions, comparing options, and controlling behavior all require cognitive resources. Natural environments often seem to place fewer demands on these resources. This idea appears in attention restoration theory, which proposes that certain environments may support recovery from prolonged directed attention by engaging the mind in a gentler way. One concept associated with this research is soft fascination. Soft fascination describes experiences that attract attention without completely capturing it. Watching light move across water is a simple example. The reflections change continuously, but there is no correct place to look. Nothing important will be missed if attention drifts. The pattern is interesting enough to hold awareness lightly, yet not so demanding that concentration becomes effortful. Slow clouds can have a similar quality. So can falling snow, leaves moving in a weak breeze, ripples spreading across a pond, mist passing gradually between trees. These scenes contain change, but the change is not urgent. The brain receives information without being asked to make many decisions about it. That combination may help explain why peaceful environments are often not completely empty. Perfect sensory deprivation is not required. In fact, many people prefer a small amount of predictable stimulation. A forest after rain may contain dripping water, distant insects, branches shifting, and occasional birdsong. A quiet shoreline may contain repeating waves. A room at night may contain the low sound of rain, ventilation, or distant traffic. What matters is often not the absolute amount of stimulation, but its pattern. Unpredictable interruptions are especially effective at capturing attention. A sudden notification sound, an unexpected vibration, or a new visual alert announces that something may have changed. Even before the content is known, the nervous system has been given a small uncertainty. Is this important? Does it require a response? Should attention move toward it? Modern environments can create many of these tiny moments of readiness. A device does not need to produce strong emotional arousal to interrupt peace. The possibility of new information can be enough. Waiting for a message illustrates this particularly well. The physical environment may be completely safe and comfortable. Nothing visible may be happening. Yet part of attention remains oriented toward an event that has not arrived. The brain is not simply waiting in empty time. It is predicting. Perhaps the message will arrive soon. Perhaps it will change your plan. Perhaps it will contain useful information. Each possibility keeps a small part of the future mentally active. This is why uncertainty and peace are related in a complicated way. Peace does not require certainty. Human beings rarely possess complete certainty about anything beyond the immediate moment. But peace becomes more difficult when uncertainty is repeatedly treated as requiring resolution. The difference can sometimes be seen in decision-making. Before a decision, several possible futures may remain active at once. One option suggests one consequence. Another suggests something different. The mind compares, rehearses, predicts, and evaluates. This internal competition consumes attention. Once a decision is made, the eventual results may still be unknown. Yet the conflict between alternatives has ended. For some people, this can create an immediate sense of relief. The future is still uncertain, but the present contains fewer competing actions. Cognitive conflict has decreased. The brain no longer has to keep several incompatible plans equally available. This helps explain why an imperfect but stable answer can sometimes feel more peaceful than endless consideration of a perfect answer that never arrives. The important change is not always in the external world. Sometimes, it is simply that one layer of mental negotiation has stopped. A similar process can occur when two desires compete. A person may want to continue working and also want to rest. They may want novelty and familiarity at the same time. They may want to make a choice while also wanting to preserve every alternative. Human minds frequently contain these contradictions. They are not signs of malfunction. Different systems evaluate different rewards, costs, memories, and possibilities. But when incompatible goals remain equally active, subtle tension can persist. Peace can appear when the brain no longer tries to satisfy every competing demand at once. This does not necessarily mean that one desire disappears. It may simply become possible for one moment to be what it is without continually comparing it with another possible moment. Acceptance is sometimes used to describe part of this process. In psychology, acceptance does not mean approval. It does not mean resignation. It does not mean deciding that every situation is good. It can simply mean allowing the fact of an experience to be present without adding a second struggle over whether that experience ought to exist. There is a difference between discomfort and the effort to eliminate every trace of discomfort immediately. There is a difference between uncertainty and repeatedly demanding certainty from a situation that cannot yet provide it. And there is a difference between having a thought and treating the appearance of that thought as an instruction. Research on psychological flexibility suggests that well-being is often associated not with eliminating difficult internal experiences, but with being able to shift attention and behavior without becoming rigidly trapped by them. Peace may partly depend on this flexibility. Thought comes into awareness. For a moment, it is clear. Then another sound appears. A faint movement of air passes through the room. Rainwater travels slowly along the edge of a roof. Attention moves again. Nothing has been forced away. Nothing has been solved. The mind has simply retained the ability to move. Rumination feels different. Rumination tends to be repetitive and sticky. The same themes return, often without producing useful new information. Attention circles around the same material as though another pass might finally produce closure. Peaceful mind wandering can also contain memories and imagined futures. But it is looser. One image becomes another. A memory appears and fades. A thought does not need to complete itself before awareness changes direction. This is why inner peace should not be confused with an empty mind. During quiet wakefulness, the brain remains active. Networks involved in memory, self-related thought, imagination, and spontaneous cognition continue functioning. The so-called default mode network, for example, is often active when attention is not strongly occupied by an external task. Quiet does not switch the brain off, nor would that be desirable. The peaceful brain is still remembering, predicting, noticing, and imagining. What may change is the urgency attached to those activities. Thought becomes less like an alarm and more like weather passing across a wide landscape. A cloud appears over distant mountains. It changes shape slowly. It does not have to be stopped. It does not have to be followed. And when the horizon remains open around it, the cloud is only one small part of everything that can be noticed. The wider the field of attention becomes, the less every small event needs to stand in the center of it. This may be one reason peaceful states often feel spacious. The room has not physically grown larger. The landscape has not moved farther away. But subjective experience changes when attention is no longer compressed around a problem, a deadline, or a decision. Urgency tends to narrow time as well as attention. When something must happen soon, the future becomes crowded with consequences. Minutes are measured against what remains unfinished. The mind begins dividing experience into steps, checking progress, estimating delays, and comparing the present with an expected outcome. Peace reduces some of this internal measuring. Time is still passing at the same physical rate, but it may feel less segmented. A few minutes beside quiet water can seem fuller than a few minutes spent repeatedly checking whether something has changed. The difference is not mysterious. It may partly reflect how attention is distributed. When attention is concentrated on a goal, much of the surrounding sensory world is filtered out. When the goal temporarily loses urgency, ordinary details can return. The faint texture of wind across grass, a reflection moving on a dark window, the soft gradient between the horizon and the evening sky. Small changes in sound that were always present but previously ignored. People sometimes describe these moments as if the environment itself has become more detailed. In reality, much of that detail was available all along. The brain had simply been prioritizing something else. Human perception is selective by necessity. The nervous system receives far more sensory information than conscious awareness can examine in equal depth. Attention therefore behaves partly like a limited allocation system, enhancing what appears relevant and reducing what does not. Threat, novelty, goals, and uncertainty are especially powerful in this competition. When those demands decrease, quieter information can become noticeable. This is one reason a peaceful forest can seem rich without feeling busy. After rain, water may remain on leaves and branches. Droplets fall at irregular intervals. Moisture darkens bark. The ground absorbs sound. Air moves gently between trunks, creating slight changes in temperature and scent. There is a great deal happening, but very little of it asks for a response. This distinction between complexity and demand is important. A natural scene can be visually complex while remaining psychologically gentle. Hundreds of leaves may occupy the field of view, yet they do not usually present hundreds of separate decisions. By contrast, a simple electronic interface can create considerable cognitive demand if each new element might require action. The nervous system does not evaluate environments only by counting stimuli. It evaluates significance. Is something changing? Does that change matter? Is a response expected? Can the event be ignored safely? Peaceful surroundings often provide answers that become predictable over time. The rain continues, the river continues, the light changes slowly. Nothing unusual follows the previous moment. Prediction becomes easier. The brain is constantly learning patterns in this way. If a sound repeats without consequence, it often becomes less attention-grabbing. If an environment remains stable, less processing may be devoted to checking every familiar feature again and again. This process is related to habituation. Although peaceful experience is far broader than habituation alone. Habituation describes a reduced response to repeated, non-significant stimulation. It is one of the nervous system's most basic ways of conserving resources. A clock-like mechanical hum, the sound of distant water, or steady rainfall may gradually move toward the background, because nothing new needs to be inferred from every repetition. Unpredictable sounds behave differently. A single irregular knock in an otherwise quiet environment can immediately become important because its meaning has not been established. Continuous, low-level sound can therefore sometimes feel less intrusive than occasional sudden noise, even when the continuous sound contains more total acoustic energy. This helps explain why some people find rain or ocean sounds suitable for sleep. The sound is not silent, it is stable. Its overall structure changes slowly enough that the auditory system can often stop treating each moment as a separate event. Individual preferences differ, of course. Some people sleep best in near silence, while others prefer a gentle, continuous background. Previous experience matters. So do sensitivity, expectation, environment, and personal association. Peace is never produced by a sound alone. It emerges from how that sound is interpreted within the larger context. The same is true of light. Very bright, rapidly changing visual environments contain more information for the brain to process. Dim, stable lighting reduces visual novelty and can also support the biological transition toward nighttime. As evening progresses, the circadian system responds to patterns of light and darkness. Melatonin secretion typically rises under appropriate nighttime conditions, helping coordinate the body's preparation for sleep. Melatonin does not create inner peace. It is part of a much larger timing system, but the gradual reduction of light across evening does something interesting psychologically as well as biologically. It simplifies the visible world. Distant details disappear. Colors become less distinct. Edges soften. The environment contains fewer visually urgent signals. A familiar room under low lights can therefore feel different from the same room at midday. The furniture has not changed. The walls are the same. But the amount of information available for visual inspection has decreased. Throughout human history, nighttime has often reduced the range of practical activities available, although the meaning of darkness has varied greatly across places and cultures. Modern artificial lighting has changed this relationship, allowing attention and activity to continue far beyond sunset. Still, many people retain evening routines that progressively lower stimulation. A lamp replaces brighter overhead light. Voices become quieter. Movement slows. Repeated actions begin to appear in a familiar sequence. These routines can become powerful cues because the brain learns temporal and contextual associations. A certain room, a certain light level, a certain pattern of sounds may repeatedly occur before sleep. Over time, those cues can become linked with what usually follows. This is not conscious reasoning. The brain is continuously learning statistical relationships between events. If a sequence reliably predicts that active demands are ending, it may gradually require less evaluation. Routines create small islands of predictability. That predictability does not guarantee peacefulness, but it reduces uncertainty. There is less to decide, less to interpret, less to monitor. Transitions matter because the nervous system rarely changes state instantaneously. A person can leave a stimulating environment, enter a quiet one, and still carry the previous level of activation for some time. The heart may remain slightly faster, muscles may remain prepared, attention may continue searching for the next event, thoughts may arrive in quick succession. Then, if the surroundings remain stable, the body begins receiving repeated evidence that the conditions have changed. No interruption arrives, no decision is requested, no new task appears. The same quiet sound continues in the background. Outside, mist gathers slowly over a valley. Nothing announces the exact moment when the transition is complete. There may be no complete transition at all. Instead, readiness decreases by degrees. One system settles, then another. Attention widens. Muscle tone softens. The next thought arrives with slightly less force than the one before it. Peace often develops in precisely this undramatic way, not as an event. More like a gradual reduction in the number of things the brain is preparing to do. As preparation decreases, the body begins to reveal how much quiet work had been taking place beneath awareness. Muscles are a good example. Even while sitting still, the body maintains a certain amount of muscle tone. Some of this is necessary for posture and movement. Some of it reflects ordinary readiness. The shoulders may remain slightly elevated. The jaw may stay gently clenched. The hands may hold more tension than they require. Muscles around the forehead and eyes can remain active long after the situation that first increased that activity has passed. Most of this happens without deliberate awareness. The nervous system is constantly adjusting the body in anticipation of what might be needed next. If the environment appears demanding, muscles may be prepared for faster movement. If the surroundings remain stable and no response is expected, some of that preparation can gradually decrease. This is one reason peacefulness often has a physical softness to it. The change does not necessarily begin with a conscious decision to relax. It may emerge because defensive preparation is no longer being reinforced. Breathing often changes in a similar way. During periods of effort or anticipation, breathing can become somewhat faster, shallower, or less regular. During quieter states, it often becomes slower and more economical. The relationship is not perfectly simple. Breathing is influenced by movement, posture, metabolism, emotion, speech, temperature, and many other factors. But respiration is closely connected with autonomic regulation. The autonomic nervous system helps coordinate processes that do not usually require conscious control, including heart activity, digestion, pupil size, and many aspects of breathing and circulation. It is sometimes described in terms of sympathetic and parasympathetic activity. The sympathetic system is associated with mobilization and increased readiness, while parasympathetic processes support many functions related to restoration, digestion, and regulation. These systems are not simple, opposing switches. Both remain active in changing combinations throughout ordinary life. Peace does not mean that sympathetic activity disappears or that the parasympathetic system somehow takes complete control. The body is more flexible than that. A peaceful state may instead involve a pattern in which less intense mobilization is required. while regulatory processes associated with rest and maintenance become more prominent. Heart activity reflects some of this flexibility. The heart does not beat with perfectly identical intervals between every beat. Tiny variations occur from moment to moment, partly under the influence of the autonomic nervous system. Researchers often study these variations through measures of heart rate variability. Certain forms of heart rate variability can provide information about regulatory processes, especially those involving parasympathetic influence, although interpretation depends heavily on measurement conditions and context. It would be too simple to say that high heart rate variability equals peace. Human physiology does not reduce so neatly to one number. Still, flexible variation in cardiovascular activity is part of the broader ability of the body to shift between states as circumstances change. That capacity to shift may matter more than remaining permanently relaxed. The nervous system is designed for movement between activation and recovery. A sudden sound may briefly increase attention. A decision may increase mental effort. Physical activity may raise heart rate. Then, when those demands pass, healthy regulation allows the organism to move toward another state. Peace is one possible destination within that movement. Not a fixed setting, not a permanent condition. A temporary arrangement that becomes appropriate when the environment no longer asks for heightened preparation. Consider a sheltered bay late at night. The water near the shore moves only slightly. Small waves rise and disappear against smooth stones. Moonlight stretches across the surface in an uneven path. The movement is continuous but mild. The body also remains in motion during peaceful states. The heart keeps beating. The lungs continue exchanging gases. Blood vessels adjust. The digestive system works. Temperature is regulated. Neural activity continues across the brain. Nothing has become inactive. Why? Instead, the pattern of activity has changed because the body is no longer organizing itself around an immediate challenge. One useful concept here is interoception. Interoception refers to the nervous system's sensing and interpretation of signals originating inside the body. These signals include information related to heartbeat, breathing, temperature, hunger, fullness, muscular effort, and the condition of internal organs. The brain does not merely receive these signals passively. It interprets them. A faster heartbeat can mean many things depending on context. It might accompany physical movement, anticipation, excitement, heat, or effort. The sensation itself does not contain a complete explanation. The brain combines bodily information with memory, surroundings, expectations, and current goals to estimate what the body state means. During peaceful conditions, internal signals may begin to support the same conclusion as the environment. Breathing is steady. The hands are warm. The jaw is no longer preparing to speak or react. The abdomen is less tense. The heart is working without unusual demand. These signals can become part of the brain's evidence that little immediate action is required. The relationship also works in the other direction. If the body remains activated after a demanding period, that activation may contribute to continued mental readiness, even after the external situation has become quiet. This helps explain why peace sometimes arrives later than expected. The event has ended. The room is quiet, but physiology still carries traces of what came before. Stress-related chemical signals do not vanish at exactly the moment a problem is resolved. Changes in circulation, muscle activity, and attentional bias can persist for a while. Recovery therefore has its own time course. The brain may intellectually know that nothing more needs to happen while the body is still slowly updating. With repeated evidence of stability, these systems can gradually come into agreement. Nothing new appears. The environment remains predictable. The body has no reason to increase preparation again. Signals of readiness begin to fade. This process may also explain why attempting to force peace can sometimes feel strangely unhelpful. The instruction to become peaceful is itself a demand. It creates a goal. Then the brain can begin checking progress. Has the body relaxed yet? Is the mind quieter? Has the feeling arrived? Each check introduces another comparison between the present state and the desired state. The absence of peace becomes something else to monitor. Genuine peacefulness often develops differently. Instead of adding another goal, the number of goals temporarily decreases. The nervous system is given fewer reasons to prepare. There is nothing special to accomplish in the next moment. Outside, the bay continues moving almost imperceptibly. The moonlight does not become still, because the water is not completely still. It trembles gently across the surface, and the body too remains alive with small fluctuations. Peace does not require those fluctuations to disappear. It only requires that they no longer mean that something urgent is about to happen. When urgency fades, the brain can begin spending less energy on constant evaluation. Vigilance is useful, but it is expensive. To remain watchful, the nervous system must repeatedly sample the environment, compare new information with expectations, update predictions, and decide whether anything deserves a response. Even when no obvious problem is present, this background monitoring can continue at a low level. The brain is always balancing several broad modes of behavior. At some times, it is useful to inspect the surroundings carefully. At other times, it is more useful to explore, eat, socialize, learn, play, or rest. Animals show similar shifts. A grazing animal may periodically lift its head to scan the environment, then return to feeding. Birds may pause between movements and remain quietly perched. Mammals often adopt looser postures when conditions seem stable. Stillness can mean many things in animal behavior, including alertness or freezing, so it cannot automatically be interpreted as relaxation. But relaxed behavior usually becomes possible only when continuous defensive preparation is unnecessary. This reveals something important about peace. It is not merely pleasant, it is efficient. Periods of reduced vigilance allow biological resources to be directed elsewhere. Digestion can proceed without competing as strongly with immediate action. Social behavior becomes easier. Exploration can become less cautious. Sleep becomes possible. The last of these is especially interesting because sleep creates a biological paradox. To sleep, the brain must reduce its responsiveness to the outside world, while the sleeping organism becomes less able to react quickly. From an evolutionary perspective, this is a vulnerable condition. And yet nearly every animal with a nervous system complex enough to sleep must enter some version of it. The benefits of sleep are important enough that organisms repeatedly tolerate this temporary reduction in environmental monitoring. Humans make that transition easier by modifying their surroundings. A sleeping place is often enclosed, temperatures made reasonably stable, lighting becomes dim. Unpredictable noise is reduced where possible. Objects are arranged in familiar locations: doors, walls, roofs, curtains, blankets, and repeated nighttime routines all reduce different kinds of uncertainty. Across cultures and periods of history, sleeping environments have varied enormously, so there is no single universal arrangement that creates peacefulness. Still, a general principle appears again and again. Rest becomes easier when the brain has fewer reasons to keep checking what is happening. A small cabin surrounded by forests illustrates this quietly. Inside, there may be a low lamp. Outside, the trees move only occasionally. The same patch of darkness remains beyond the window. Rainwater slides from the edge of the roof at irregular but familiar intervals. Nothing about this environment guarantees sleep, but it offers little novelty. The surroundings are protected, repetitive, and easy to predict. After enough time in a place like this, the environment itself may become associated with reduced vigilance. Memory contributes strongly to this process. The brain learns places. It learns the sound of a particular room at night, the quality of light through a certain window, the sequence of sounds produced by familiar plumbing, heating, wind, or rain. It learns what usually follows those cues. This is one form of context-dependent learning. Information is often retrieved and interpreted partly according to the environment in which it occurs. A setting that has repeatedly accompanied rest may later make rest-related expectations easier to retrieve. This can happen without a person consciously remembering dozens of individual nights. The association can be more diffuse. A room simply feels quiet. A certain kind of rainfall feels settling. A familiar nighttime landscape seems to contain less uncertainty. Memory is giving the present moment a history. This is also one reason peace is subjective. A sound that feels deeply familiar to one person may be unfamiliar to another. A remote landscape may feel spacious to someone who enjoys solitude, and strangely empty to someone else. A completely silent room may feel restful for one listener and uncomfortable for another. The nervous system does not respond to physical properties alone. It responds to what those properties have come to mean. Previous experience, current mood, expectation, personality, culture, and recent levels of stimulation can all shape the interpretation of a supposedly peaceful environment. Even nostalgia can sometimes overlap with tranquility. The sound of rain may resemble evenings from years earlier. A particular shade of twilight may recall a familiar place. The scent of damp earth after a summer shower may bring back a memory before the memory itself becomes clear. Nostalgia, however, is not the same as peace. It can contain longing, sadness, warmth, distance, and emotional complexity. Yet familiar memories may sometimes reduce uncertainty by placing the present inside a pattern the brain already understands. Social environments can do something similar. Humans do not regulate themselves only in isolation. We continuously read other people, movement speed, vocal tone, facial expression, posture, timing, and predictability. All provide information about the social environment. A person who speaks steadily and moves without abruptness may communicate, intentionally or not, that no rapid reaction is expected. A familiar companion sitting quietly nearby can reduce some of the work involved in monitoring social intentions. Researchers use the term co-regulation in several related ways to describe how people influence one another's emotional and physiological states. The exact mechanisms are complex, and scientists are still investigating how different forms of social presence affect arousal and regulation. But the broader pattern is well established. Humans respond strongly to signs of trust and predictability in other people. A calm social environment can reduce uncertainty. There is less need to interpret every gesture, less need to anticipate sudden changes in tone, less need to infer what another person is about to do. This does not mean peacefulness always requires company. Chosen solitude can be deeply peaceful. precisely because social monitoring is temporarily unnecessary. There is nobody to answer, no expression to interpret, no conversation to maintain, no expectation to satisfy. But chosen solitude is very different from unwanted isolation. The physical fact of being alone does not determine the emotional meaning of aloneness. Peaceful companionship and peaceful solitude are therefore distinct states. One reduces vigilance through trusted presence. The other may reduce it through the absence of social demands. Both can create a similar result. Fewer signals compete for attention. Quiet meadow at dusk may hold only the slow movement of grass. A nearby person may sit without speaking, or no one may be there at all. In either case, the important quality is not emptiness. It is the absence of pressure for the moment to become something else. Nothing in the scene is insisting on a response. And when the brain receives enough evidence of that, it can begin redirecting energy away from readiness and toward the quieter work of simply continuing to exist. Simply continuing to exist can feel surprisingly unfamiliar in environments built around constant response. Many modern systems are designed to present the next thing almost immediately. A new message appears before the previous thought has fully ended. A recommendation follows the end of a video. A screen refreshes. A list updates. A task produces another task. None of these events is necessarily intense on its own. But together, they can keep attention in a mild state of anticipation. Something else may happen soon. Something else may require checking. Something else may deserve comparison. The nervous system does not need to be frightened in order to remain busy. It only needs to believe that the next piece of information could matter. This is one reason peace can be disturbed by very small uncertainties. Waiting for a reply can occupy more attention than the reply itself. An unanswered question can remain active even when the answer is not urgently needed. A decision that could easily wait until tomorrow may return several times during the evening because the mind has not yet classified it as finished. The problem is not always importance. Sometimes it is incompleteness. The brain prefers models of the world that are coherent enough to guide action. When several possibilities remain open, prediction becomes more demanding. This does not mean uncertainty is inherently harmful. Human beings live with uncertainty constantly and often tolerate it extremely well. What matters is whether uncertainty is being treated as actionable. If no action is possible, repeated mental rehearsal may not improve the situation. Yet the predictive systems of the brain can continue checking anyway, because checking has often been useful in other situations. A peaceful state can emerge when this checking gradually loses priority. The unanswered message is still unanswered. Tomorrow remains unknown. A distant problem still exists, but for a while, the brain stops requesting another simulation of it. This shift is closely related to control. Humans generally prefer some ability to influence important outcomes. Perceived control can make difficult situations easier to manage because action becomes possible and uncertainty is reduced. But control also has a cost. Every controllable variable can become another variable to monitor. Is the plan still correct? Could the result be improved? Would another adjustment help? Is there a better option? The capacity to shape an outcome is valuable during action. Peace often appears during the opposite interval, when active adjustment temporarily stops. A river moving slowly through grass does not become peaceful because it has reached a destination. It is still going somewhere. Water continues around stones, through bends, beneath overhanging plants. yet nothing in its movement looks hurried because each moment is not being evaluated against a faster possible version of itself. Human cognition frequently performs exactly this kind of comparison. The present is compared with an imagined better present. A room could be cleaner. A plan could be more efficient. A decision could be more certain. Conversation could have gone differently. A future outcome could be optimized further. This capacity for counterfactual thinking is enormously useful. It supports learning, planning, creativity, and problem solving. But the same ability can keep the present moment in permanent competition with alternatives. Peace may involve periods when comparison becomes less dominant, not because every alternative has vanished, not because the present has been declared perfect, only because improvement is no longer the active task. This resembles the psychological experience sometimes described as enoughness. Enoughness is not a technical neuroscience term, and it should not be treated as a single measurable brain state. But the subjective feeling it points toward is useful. For a while, no additional achievement is required for the moment to continue. The chair is comfortable enough. The room is quiet enough. The decision can remain incomplete enough. The evening does not need to become more successful. The mind is not required to convert every remaining minute into progress. When this sense appears, goal-directed thinking may loosen. Goals organize attention around differences between what is and what is wanted. That gap is useful because it motivates action. But when every moment contains an active gap, rest becomes difficult. The brain remains oriented toward the next correction. Peace often involves a temporary reduction in those comparisons. The world does not become perfect. The number of active demands simply becomes smaller. This may also explain why doing nothing can feel uncomfortable at first. A nervous system accustomed to frequent novelty may interpret reduced stimulation as a missing signal. Attention searches, what is next? What can be checked? What has changed? The first moments of quiet can therefore resemble boredom. Boredom and peace are not identical, however. Boredom usually contains an urge for the current level of stimulation to change. Attention is underengaged, and novelty becomes attractive. Peace can also be low in stimulation, but the impulse to escape that low stimulation is weaker. A simple experience remains sufficient for longer. Clouds move. Rain continues. A reflection trembles on water. Minutes pass without producing much new information. At first, the brain may search for something more interesting. Then, if no strong demand appears, that search can soften. Tiny details begin to occupy awareness without becoming important. The uneven rhythm of drops from a branch. A faint band of lighter sky near the horizon. The way one section of water reflects the moon, while another remains almost black. These details are not necessarily more pleasurable than dramatic stimulation, they are simply easier to stay with. Once novelty seeking has become less urgent, this helps clarify why peace is often less dramatic than happiness. Some forms of happiness are energetic. They involve anticipation, reward, social excitement, laughter, movement, or the pleasure of something newly achieved. Peace belongs more often to the low arousal side of positive experience. It may feel neutral, contented, settled, or simply undisturbed. Because it is quiet, it can be overlooked. Nothing memorable may happen. There is no peak, no clear moment of arrival. A peaceful evening may be remembered mainly for the absence of friction. The nervous system was not pulled in many directions. The future did not repeatedly demand inspection. The present was allowed to remain ordinary, and ordinary moments can become unexpectedly rich when they are no longer treated as spaces between more important events. Near a still lake, the sky continues darkening. The far shore becomes less distinct. Small sounds travel farther through the cooler air. Nothing significant has changed. But attention has stopped waiting for significance. For a little while, that is enough. When attention stops waiting for significance, ordinary perception can begin to feel less compressed. The brain is still selecting information, because selection never really stops. But the threshold for what deserves priority may shift. A small sound can remain only a sound. A memory can appear without becoming a problem. A sensation can be noticed without being evaluated immediately. This softer relationship to experience is one reason peaceful states are often associated with attentional flexibility. Flexibility does not mean attention becomes weak or vague. It means attention can move without getting trapped. A person might notice the sound of rain, then the weight of a blanket, then a thought about tomorrow, then the darkness beyond a window. None of these has to dominate. The mind can pass among them. That movement is different from the repetitive quality of rumination, where attention returns to the same theme again and again, as though resolution might appear through continued repetition. Rumination often feels mentally sticky. Peaceful thought can be active without being sticky. The brain can wander. It can remember. It can imagine. It can notice. Then it can let one mental event recede when another arrives. This is important because quiet wakefulness is not mentally empty. Even when the external world becomes simple, spontaneous thought continues. The brain may retrieve fragments of memory, construct possible futures, replay pieces of conversation, or generate images that seem to come from nowhere in particular. Some of this activity is associated with interacting systems often discussed under the broad label of the default mode network. The default mode network is not a switch for daydreaming, nor is it a single center of inner experience. It includes multiple brain regions that tend to interact during forms of internally oriented cognition, such as autobiographical memory, imagination, self-related thinking, and spontaneous mental activity. Peace does not require this network to become silent. In fact, a peaceful mind may contain a great deal of internally generated material. The important difference is often whether those thoughts are experienced as urgent. A memory of something unfinished can arise without starting another round of analysis. Opio, an imagined future can appear without becoming a demand for prediction. A question can remain open. The mind can carry unresolved material while still allowing the present to continue. This may be one of the deepest differences between peace and control. Control tries to reduce uncertainty by changing, organizing, or predicting what comes next. Peace can sometimes coexist with uncertainty because it reduces the immediate requirement to do anything about it. That is not passivity. Passivity concerns behavior and the absence of action where action might otherwise be possible or useful. Peace concerns the relationship between current experience and perceived demand. A person can be peaceful before taking decisive action. They can be peaceful while a difficult choice still exists. They can be peaceful during a temporary pause in the middle of a complex situation. The state does not erase future responsibility. It only changes how much of that responsibility must occupy the present moment. Psychological flexibility is relevant here, because rigid mental control can become tiring. The more tightly attention is held on one concern, the more effort may be required to maintain that focus and suppress competing information. Flexible attention allows priorities to change when the context changes. If nothing can be usefully done at night, the same thought that deserved attention in the afternoon may no longer deserve the same amount of attention now. The thought has not become false. Its timing has changed. Brains are highly sensitive to timing and context. A sound that matters in one situation may be irrelevant in another. A decision that requires action at noon may safely remain incomplete at midnight. A sensation that would be important during physical exertion may mean something entirely different while resting. Peace often depends on this contextual updating. The nervous system gradually recognizes that what was relevant earlier does not need to stay at the center forever. Sometimes this updating is delayed. That is one reason evening fatigue can feel paradoxical. As the day progresses, sleep pressure increases. The body moves closer to a state in which prolonged wakefulness becomes harder to maintain. Yet being tired does not always make emotional regulation easier. Research suggests that insufficient sleep and extended wakefulness can affect attention, impulse control, emotional reactivity, and the brain's ability to regulate responses to negative information. So the evening can contain two processes at once. The body may be increasingly ready for sleep, while the tired brain becomes somewhat less efficient at handling unresolved thoughts. This can make small concerns feel larger than they seemed earlier. A peaceful environment cannot solve those concerns, but it can reduce the amount of additional information arriving at the same time. Dim light removes some visual demand. A familiar room removes some uncertainty. Steady sound reduces surprise. A repeated routine removes choices. The brain may have less regulatory capacity late in the day, but the environment can also ask less of that capacity. This is one reason peaceful evenings often depend less on producing a special feeling and more on reducing competition. The mind does not have to become perfectly quiet. It simply has fewer external events competing with whatever internal material is already present. Circadian timing contributes another layer. The human circadian system helps coordinate daily rhythms and alertness, body temperature, hormone release, metabolism, and sleep tendency. Light is one of its most important environmental signals. As natural evening light decreases, biological systems gradually shift toward nighttime conditions. Under typical circumstances, melatonin levels rise during the biological evening, helping signal that the internal night has begun. Melatonin is not a chemical form of peace, and its presence does not guarantee sleepiness or tranquility. But it is part of the biological context in which nighttime becomes different from daytime. As the visual world darkens, the psychological environment changes too. Distant objects lose detail. The horizon becomes simpler. Colors fade toward blue, gray, and black. A forest that contained thousands of visible leaves during the afternoon becomes broad shapes and quiet layers. A still lake reflects only a narrow strip of fading sky. The amount of visual information decreases. Nothing has disappeared completely. It has simply become less available for inspection. Perhaps this is one reason darkness can sometimes feel peaceful when it is familiar and protected. The world becomes less detailed. The boundaries of attention become softer. The nervous system still listens. It still predicts. It still maintains the body. But there is less to examine. Over the water, the last pale light settles into the horizon. A few reflections remain. Then those reflections become harder to distinguish from the surface itself. The landscape has not stopped existing. It has only stopped asking to be looked at so closely. When the world stops asking to be examined so closely, the distinction between attention and vigilance becomes easier to see. Attention is broader than threat monitoring. It can be curious, receptive, selective, wandering, or absorbed. Vigilance is more specific. It involves maintaining readiness for something important that may occur. A vigilant mind keeps part of itself near the edge of change. It listens for interruption, checks for novelty, and it keeps possibilities available. This is useful when circumstances are uncertain, but it can continue even after those circumstances have become stable. The amygdala is often mentioned in discussions of threat and emotion, but it would be misleading to describe it as a simple alarm center. It participates in learning about biologically relevant events, especially when those events carry emotional significance or uncertainty. It interacts with many other regions involved in memory, attention, perception, and bodily regulation. Peace does not arise because the amygdala becomes inactive, nor does it depend on one part of the prefrontal cortex taking control of everything below it. The brain works through interacting systems. Prefrontal regions help evaluate context, maintain goals, inhibit some responses, and update behavior when circumstances change. Memory systems contribute information about what similar situations have meant in the past. Sensory systems report what is happening now. Autonomic systems adjust the body. Attention systems decide what deserves priority. A peaceful state emerges when these systems, together, increasingly agree that little requires immediate intervention. That agreement may take time. Suppose a day has been full of decisions. By evening, every major task has ended. The room is quiet. Nothing else is scheduled. From the outside, the situation already looks peaceful, but the nervous system has spent hours learning a different pattern. Something happens. Respond. Something changes. Adjust. Something is unfinished. Remember it. The brain has been rewarded for staying engaged. Then, suddenly, very little happens. At first, the absence of demand may itself feel unusual. Attention can continue searching simply because searching has been the dominant mode. This is one reason a transition toward peace can contain restlessness without contradiction. The environment has settled before the nervous system has. With time, repeated non-events become information. No message arrives. No new task begins. The sound outside remains the same. The lighting changes only gradually. Nothing important follows the previous minute. The brain can begin lowering the expected value of continued monitoring. Prediction becomes less costly because the future looks more like the recent past. This is one of the quiet powers of stability. Stable environments reduce the number of surprising updates the brain must make. A distant shoreline beneath a clear evening sky contains enormous physical complexity. Yet from moment to moment, it changes slowly. Water shifts, light fades, air moves. But each new moment resembles the last closely enough that there is little need for rapid revision. Slow, continuous motion can therefore feel very different from unpredictable interruption. The visual system is sensitive to motion because motion can reveal changes in the environment. Yet not all motion carries the same significance. Leaves moving gently in wind are highly structured. Clouds drifting across distant mountains are slow. Reflections trembling on water are continuous. Nothing suddenly demands a choice. These scenes provide stimulation without repeatedly resetting attention. Rapid artificial changes can behave differently. A flashing alert, a new window, a sudden sound. or an unexpected piece of information can trigger orienting responses because the brain has to determine what changed and whether it matters. Each interruption may be tiny, but a sequence of tiny interruptions can prevent attention from fully loosening. Peaceful environments often do the opposite. They allow the same stream of information to continue long enough that the brain can stop asking what comes next. This is not because nature is inherently peaceful in every form. Natural environments can be stimulating, unfamiliar, uncomfortable, or demanding. The effect depends on context, but many commonly preferred peaceful scenes share certain properties: slow change, visual coherence, gentle repetition, relatively low threat, and few signals requiring immediate action. A misty valley at dawn is one example. The fog moves, but slowly enough that no single moment is especially important. Trees appear and disappear at the edge of visibility. The scene changes continuously without producing a sequence of decisions. Attention can rest on it lightly. This may be part of why people sometimes describe such scenes as restorative. Research in environmental psychology suggests that exposure to some natural settings may support mood and attention, though effects vary across people and circumstances. One possible explanation is that these environments engage attention gently while reducing some of the demands associated with active monitoring and directed control. The mind is occupied, but not crowded. It has something to notice without having much to manage. This distinction also helps explain why visual simplicity can feel restful. A distant horizon contains fewer competing objects than a cluttered room. A snow-covered field removes many small visual differences. Fog softens edges. Still water organizes reflections into broad areas of tone and movement. When the visual field becomes simpler, fewer objects compete to become the next focus. Again, simplicity is not automatically peaceful. An empty, unfamiliar place may feel uncertain. A sparse room can feel cold rather than restful. Meaning matters. Memory matters. Expectation matters. But when simplicity is combined with familiarity and stability, cognitive demand may fall. There are fewer visual questions. What is that? Where is that? Does this need attention? Should something be moved, checked, compared, or interpreted? The environment becomes easier to leave partially unattended. That phrase may come close to the heart of peace. A peaceful environment is often one the brain feels permitted not to inspect continuously. A peaceful thought is one that can remain unfinished. A peaceful sensation is one that does not need immediate correction. A peaceful moment is one that does not constantly prove its importance. Over time, this permission can spread. The sound of rain becomes background. The room no longer needs checking. Tomorrow can remain tomorrow. A thought arises and becomes one small event among many. Outside, clouds continue moving across a darkening sky. Their shapes change without announcement. No moment asks to be remembered more than the one before it, and because attention does not have to hold tightly to any of them, the whole landscape can remain present without becoming demanding. When a landscape can remain present without becoming demanding, the sense of time may begin to change as well. Urgency tends to organize time around what has not happened yet. A meeting begins in 20 minutes. A message may arrive soon. A task must be finished before evening. The mind measures the present against an approaching event. This makes time feel directional. Each minute is not simply experienced. It is compared with a goal. Peace often reduces this comparison. There may still be plans for tomorrow, but they are no longer pulling strongly on the current moment. The future remains available without occupying the foreground. This can make peaceful periods feel slower, though subjective time is complicated and does not follow a single rule. Sometimes uneventful periods seem to pass quickly in memory because few distinct events were encoded. At other times, a quiet moment feels unusually spacious while it is happening because attention is no longer being rushed from one objective to another. The difference may depend partly on how attention is distributed. When people are hurried, awareness becomes organized around completion. What remains? How long will this take? What comes after this? The mind keeps converting time into distance from a goal. When that process decreases, individual moments may contain more sensory detail. A cloud takes several minutes to cross one section of sky. A reflection shifts by almost nothing. A thin branch moves once, then becomes still. There is enough time to notice changes that would normally disappear beneath faster concerns. Peace may therefore widen awareness, not by changing the clock, but by reducing the number of events competing to define what the clock means. This wider awareness is sometimes described as broad or diffuse attention. It does not mean everything is processed equally. The brain still selects, but selection becomes less tightly bound to one urgent target. This can create the subjective impression of space around thoughts. A thought arises, there is room around it. A sound appears elsewhere. A sensation becomes noticeable. The thought remains, but it is no longer the entire landscape. That quality is important, because internal conflict often feels narrow. When two possible actions compete strongly, attention tends to move repeatedly between them. Choose this, perhaps the other option is better. Return to the first. Imagine the consequences. Reconsider. This creates cognitive friction. Peace can sometimes arrive not when the perfect answer is found, but when the mind no longer insists that perfect certainty must be produced immediately. A decision may still be imperfect. The future may remain unclear, but the conflict between acting now and continuing to analyze has ended. One layer of demand has disappeared. Acceptance can operate in a similar way. A difficult feeling may still be present. Perhaps there is disappointment, perhaps mild uncertainty, perhaps a lingering sense that something could have gone differently. Acceptance does not transform these experiences into pleasant ones. It reduces the additional struggle over their existence. Research on experiential avoidance and psychological flexibility suggests that efforts to rigidly escape or suppress unwanted internal experiences can sometimes increase mental burden. The brain must continue checking whether the unwanted experience is still there. Has the thought returned? Is the feeling gone? Why is it still present? The monitoring itself becomes part of the problem. Allowing an internal event to exist without constant correction may reduce this secondary layer of work. But this does not mean every thought is useful. It does not mean every emotion should guide behavior. It simply means that existence and action are different things. A thought can exist without being obeyed. A feeling can exist without being solved. A memory can exist without being replayed to completion. Peace may grow in the gap between experiencing something and treating that experience as a command. The same principle appears in sensory environments. A sound does not have to disappear for the environment to feel quiet. A movement does not have to stop for a landscape to feel still. A cloud can move without disturbing the sky. rain can continue without making the night feel active. The brain is capable of classifying ongoing events as non-urgent. Once this happens, they can remain in awareness without repeatedly attracting orienting responses. Once this happens, this is one reason low-level continuous sound can sometimes be easier to tolerate than intermittent sound. A steady rainfall forms a predictable acoustic background. An occasional isolated noise forces the auditory system to ask a new question each time. What was that? Is it relevant? Will it happen again? Predictability reduces the number of unanswered questions. For some people, this makes soft rain, distant surf, or gentle airflow feel peaceful. For others, different sounds work better, or near silence is preferred. Individual differences are important. There is no universal peaceful soundscape. Associations learned over time matter greatly. A sound linked with childhood evenings may feel settling to one person and unfamiliar to another. A room with very little furniture may feel uncluttered to one person and exposed to someone else. A wide open field may feel freeing or empty. A dense forest may feel sheltered or overly enclosed. Scientific descriptions of peace must leave room for these differences. The nervous system does not respond to abstract properties such as quietness or simplicity in isolation. It responds to meaning. Meaning is built from memory, expectation, current state, and context. This helps explain why the same place can feel different on different nights. A familiar bedroom may feel deeply restful after an ordinary day and mentally busy after a day filled with unresolved decisions. The physical environment has barely changed. The brain arriving in it has. Peace is therefore dynamic. It is not a permanent trait possessed by certain people. Even individuals who are usually composed move in and out of peaceful states. Alertness rises when something matters. Motivation rises when action is useful. Excitement can be energizing. Short periods of stress can help organize behavior. The nervous system is designed to change. Permanent peace would not be adaptive. What matters more is the ability to return. Recovery is part of regulation. After activation, physiological systems do not always settle immediately. Heart rate may normalize before thoughts slow down. Muscle tension may remain after the decision has been made. Attention may keep scanning even after the environment has become predictable. The return can be uneven, and that is still a return. Across a quiet field at dusk, the last wind moves through the grass and then weakens. A few stems continue swaying after the stronger movement has already passed. They do not stop all at once. They settle according to their own momentum. The nervous system often does something similar. What matters is not that every movement ends instantly, only that, little by little, fewer of those movements are preparing for what comes next. As fewer movements prepare for what comes next, rest becomes less dependent on reaching some perfectly settled state. This matters because the body and brain are rarely completely quiet before sleep. There may still be a slight movement in the legs. A thought may continue for several seconds longer than expected. A distant sound may briefly attract attention. The heart keeps adjusting from beat to beat. The mind continues producing fragments of language, memory, and imagery. Sleep does not require every one of these processes to stop first. Instead, the threshold for responding to them gradually changes. A sensation that would have seemed important earlier in the day may now pass without further analysis. A sound may be registered and then released. A thought may begin but lose its place before reaching a conclusion. This gradual loss of urgency is closely related to the strange vulnerability of sleep. While awake, the brain maintains access to the environment through continuous sensory sampling. During sleep, responsiveness becomes reduced and selective. Some information can still be processed, but much of the outside world is given less priority. For this to happen, defensive monitoring has to loosen, not disappear completely. The sleeping brain still retains ways of detecting significant signals. A meaningful sound, an unusual change in the environment, or something personally relevant can sometimes break through sleep more easily than neutral background information. But ordinary, predictable signals are increasingly ignored. This is why stable nighttime environments can be so useful. The same soft hum continues. The same darkness remains beyond the window. The same roof contains the small sound of rain. Nothing new is being introduced. The brain receives repeated confirmation that the recent past is a reasonable guide to the immediate future. Predictability lowers the value of constant checking. In this sense, peace before sleep may partly involve a quiet negotiation with vulnerability. Wakefulness allows active monitoring. Sleep requires relinquishing some of it. The brain must tolerate not knowing exactly what will happen during the next few hours. Humans have always shaped sleeping spaces in ways that help make this possible. Shelter creates boundaries. Familiar objects reduce novelty. Repeated evening sounds make the acoustic environment easier to predict. Soft fabrics reduce uncomfortable sensory changes. Low voices, where they are present, often carry less abrupt variation than active daytime conversation. Enclosure can limit visual complexity. Across cultures, the specific forms differ enormously, but the general effect is often similar. The sleeping environment contains fewer variables that demand immediate interpretation. Architecture can contribute to this feeling. A room with controlled lighting, moderate acoustic absorption, and relatively little visual clutter may be experienced as less demanding than a space filled with sharp reflections, irregular noise, and many competing objects. Some environmental psychology research suggests that visual complexity, noise, lighting, and spatial arrangement can influence attention and arousal, though responses vary between individuals and contexts. A peaceful room is not defined by minimalism. It is defined more by how little work the environment asks the brain to perform. A richly textured wooden room can feel peaceful. So can a simple white room. A small enclosed bedroom may feel protected. A high-ceilinged room may feel spacious. There's no single geometry of tranquility. Meaning matters more than formula. The same principle applies to natural settings. Snow can simplify a landscape by covering small variations in color and texture. Fog can hide distant detail. Open water can create broad, continuous surfaces. Forests can form repeating vertical patterns. Mountains can provide large, slow-changing shapes at a distance. These environments often reduce the number of immediate choices available to attention. There is nowhere in particular that awareness has to go. The gaze can remain loose. This low-effort visual engagement resembles the idea of soft fascination. Attention is held gently enough that directed control can ease. A person staring at slow-moving clouds does not usually need to remember where each cloud was a moment earlier. The scene does not demand accuracy. There is no success condition. The absence of a success condition is important. Much of daily cognition is structured around evaluation. Was the task completed? Is the answer correct? Was the response appropriate? Did the plan work? Is the current state better than the previous one? These comparisons are useful, but they keep the mind oriented toward measurement. Peaceful experiences often contain very little measurement. A river does not need to be watched correctly. Rain does not require interpretation. A distant horizon does not become more successful if attention remains on it for 5 minutes instead of 1. The experience is not improved by performance. This removes a subtle form of pressure. Even attempts at relaxation can accidentally recreate evaluation. A person may notice that thoughts are still active and conclude that relaxation is failing. Then the mind begins monitoring the failure. Is the body calmer now? Are thoughts slowing down? Why is sleep not closer? Each question turns rest into another project. The paradox is that peace often appears more easily when the project itself loses importance. The brain settles, not because it has achieved a state called peacefulness, but because fewer states are being demanded from it. This is one reason quiet can initially make thoughts feel louder. During a busy day, internal speech competes with external stimulation. When the environment becomes simple, thoughts have less competition and may become easier to notice. Their apparent increase does not necessarily mean the mind has become more active. It may simply mean that attention can hear what was already present. With time, if those thoughts are not repeatedly treated as urgent, their prominence may decrease. One thought finishes, another begins. Some never finish at all. The brain learns that incomplete internal events can exist without requiring action. Outside, snow falls slowly through a dark landscape. Each flake moves differently, yet the overall scene remains quiet. No individual movement matters very much. The mind can become similar. Many small events continue. Sensations, memories, fragments of plans, passing images, but the system no longer gives each one the same invitation to continue. Some are noticed, some disappear, some remain for a while, and then loosen on their own. Peace is not the elimination of mental events. It is what becomes possible when those events are no longer competing so strongly to determine what happens next. When mental events stop competing so strongly to determine what happens next, another quality often becomes noticeable. The present moment becomes less crowded by alternatives. Human thought is remarkably good at creating possible versions of reality. What if this happens? What if something had gone differently? What would happen if another choice were made? Could this situation be improved? Could a better answer still exist? These simulations are useful. They help with planning, learning, and adaptation. But each possible version of reality can also become a temporary demand on attention. The present is no longer only what is happening. It becomes what is happening compared with what might happen, what could have happened, or what perhaps ought to happen. Peace often contains fewer of these comparisons. Not none. The brain continues imagining, but imagined alternatives become less competitive. They lose some of their ability to displace the actual moment. A still pond beneath a darkening sky does not need to become a different pond. Its surface may hold a few fallen leaves. The reflection may be imperfect. A small ripple may move outward from somewhere near the shore. nothing about the scene requires correction. That absence of correction is psychologically important. Much of cognitive effort is organized around detecting discrepancies. A goal represents one state. The current situation represents another. The difference between them helps guide behavior. This is essential when action is useful. If someone is preparing food, solving a problem, repairing something, navigating a route, or learning a skill, the brain repeatedly compares what exists with what is intended. Peace becomes more likely when this discrepancy monitoring can temporarily reduce. There is no immediate target, no preferred version of the next 5 minutes, no requirement for experience to prove that it is progressing. This does not mean goals disappear from life. It means goals can become temporarily inactive. The brain is capable of storing intentions without continuously rehearsing them. A task can belong to tomorrow. A question can remain unanswered until more information exists. A plan can remain incomplete without becoming the center of the evening. When this happens, cognitive load decreases. Mental load is not a single, measurable substance. It refers broadly to the amount of information, control, memory, decision-making, and monitoring required at a given time. The more simultaneous demands the mind maintains, the more crowded experience can feel. A peaceful period often contains fewer active demands. This helps explain the appeal of simple routines. A familiar sequence of evening actions requires fewer new decisions. The sequence already exists. One event predicts the next. Light is turned lower. The room becomes quieter. Objects stop moving from place to place. The same familiar sounds continue. There is less need to choose among alternatives. Decision fatigue is a broad and sometimes loosely used term, and research on how repeated choices affect later decision-making is more complicated than popular descriptions sometimes suggest. Still, making decisions does require attention, especially when the choices are meaningful or uncertain. An environment containing fewer immediate choices can therefore feel less demanding. Nothing needs selecting. Nothing needs optimizing. The present can remain unedited. This may be one reason people sometimes enjoy sitting near water for long periods. A lake does not present a sequence of prompts. Clouds do not request evaluation. Distant mountains do not ask for a response. The scene changes, but it does not become a task. Attention can engage without becoming responsible. Responsibility is an important part of adult cognition. The brain keeps track of unfinished obligations, social expectations, future plans, and possible consequences. This capacity allows complex life to function, but peace often appears in brief intervals when responsibility becomes temporarily quiet, not erased, just deferred. The mind no longer has to hold every obligation at the same distance from action. Some things move farther away. They still exist, but they no longer occupy the nearest part of awareness. This change can also alter bodily experience. When the brain stops preparing for immediate action, posture may become less guarded. The hands may rest more naturally. The muscles around the eyes may work less. Breathing may become less tied to speech, movement, or anticipation. Small bodily signals that were previously hidden beneath activity can become easier to notice. This is another form of interoceptive updating. The brain reads the quieter body and receives information consistent with reduced demand. The body reads the quieter environment and adjusts accordingly. Neither side completely causes the other. They influence each other continuously. A peaceful state emerges from this interaction. This helps explain why environmental peace and inner peace can reinforce one another without being identical. A quiet environment cannot guarantee a peaceful mind, and a peaceful mind does not require a perfectly quiet environment. But when external and internal conditions point in the same direction, less conflict remains to be resolved. The room is quiet. The body is relatively still. The next task is not immediate. The sounds are predictable. The thoughts that appear are allowed to remain incomplete. Several systems begin supporting the same interpretation. For now, little is required. That interpretation can deepen gradually. A distant sound occurs and disappears. Nothing follows it. A memory appears and fades. Nothing needs to be done with it. The mind notices a small imperfection in the room. It remains an imperfection. No action begins. This ability to leave things unfinished can be surprisingly restful, not because unfinished things are always harmless. Some situations genuinely require attention, but the nervous system does not benefit from treating every unresolved detail as equally urgent at every hour. Context matters. Timing matters. The ability to suspend action is part of flexible regulation. Peace often occupies that suspended interval. Outside, a narrow river continues moving through grass. The surface reflects the last remaining light. Its path is already there. The water does not need to reconsider each bend before reaching it. And for a while, the mind can also move without repeatedly asking whether another path would be better. When the mind no longer needs to reconsider every possible path, uncertainty can become less intrusive. Uncertainty is often mentally expensive because it keeps several models of the future alive at once. A message may arrive. A plan may change. A result may be different from what was expected. A decision may still need to be revised. As long as these possibilities remain active, attention can continue returning to them. The brain prefers prediction because prediction reduces surprise. When events follow expected patterns, fewer rapid updates are required. But perfect prediction is impossible. Peace, therefore, cannot depend on knowing exactly what will happen. It depends more on whether the unknown future is being treated as an immediate problem. This distinction is subtle. A person can know that tomorrow contains uncertainty and still feel peaceful tonight. The uncertainty remains real. What changes is its timing. Nothing can be usefully settled in the present moment, so the brain gradually stops trying to settle it. This is not the same as denial. Denial changes the interpretation of reality. Peace can leave reality intact. The unanswered question remains unanswered. The uncertain outcome remains uncertain. The future is still open, but the present no longer has to simulate every version of it. In research on predictive processing, scientists often describe the brain as continuously generating expectations and comparing them with incoming information. These ideas are still being refined, and there is no single accepted theory that explains all perception and emotion through prediction alone. Even so, prediction clearly plays an important role in ordinary cognition. The more uncertain an environment is, the more valuable additional information can become. This is why intermittent signals are so effective at holding attention. When a result arrives at predictable times, the brain can more easily leave it alone between checks. When a result arrives, when it could arrive at any moment, attention may remain partly available for it. A notification is a small example. The device may be silent for 10 minutes. Nothing happens, yet the possibility of change remains. The brain can maintain a low-level readiness even in the absence of actual stimulation. Peace often grows when this readiness loses purpose. Perhaps the expected event will not happen until morning. Perhaps the decision has already been made. Perhaps there is no further information to gather. Once the mind recognizes that additional checking cannot improve the present, some of the prediction machinery can loosen its grip. The same principle applies to internal uncertainty. Thoughts are not always complete. Emotions are not always easily named. A A person may feel slightly unsettled without knowing exactly why. The brain often prefers a clear explanation. Was it the conversation earlier? The unfinished task? The unusual mood? The tiredness? A definite cause can feel satisfying because it simplifies the model. But inner experience is frequently more complicated than a single cause. Multiple influences overlap. Memory, fatigue, bodily state, environment, expectation, and recent events can all contribute. Peace sometimes appears when the demand for a perfect explanation decreases. The feeling can remain partly unexplained. The mind does not have to solve its own state before the state is allowed to change. This is another reason acceptance is different from resignation. Resignation implies giving up on a desired outcome. Acceptance can simply mean accurate contact with what is already present. There is uncertainty. There is a thought. There is a mild tension in the shoulders. There is a question that does not yet have an answer. Nothing about acknowledging these facts determines what will happen later. It only reduces the effort involved in pretending that the present is something else. Secondary struggle can be more demanding than the original experience. A small discomfort may remain small until the mind begins insisting that it must disappear. An uncertain thought may remain brief until attention repeatedly checks whether it has been resolved. A quiet evening may remain quiet until the brain starts evaluating whether it feels peaceful enough. Evaluation creates another layer. Peace often arrives when some of those layers fall away. Not every internal event is turned into evidence. A restless thought does not prove that rest is impossible. A moment of impatience does not define the whole evening. A sudden sound does not mean the environment has become demanding. Experience can remain local. One event does not have to become the meaning of everything around it. This ability to keep events in proportion is related to flexible regulation. The prefrontal cortex participates in many processes that help maintain context, compare goals, inhibit some responses, and update behavior. But again, there is no single control center deciding whether peace is allowed. Regulation emerges from coordination. Sensory information suggests that the environment is stable. Memory suggests that the room is familiar. The body begins to show reduced preparation. Attention becomes less narrow. Internal thoughts become less compelling. Each system contributes a small piece of evidence. Together, they make urgency less likely. A forest after rain offers a useful image for this. At first, droplets fall frequently from leaves and branches. The ground is saturated. Tiny streams run along roots. The whole forest seems to be continuing the rain even after the clouds have moved away. Then, gradually, the dripping becomes less frequent. One branch releases a final drop. Another remains wet, but still. The soil continues absorbing water long after the storm itself is gone. The environment does not switch instantly from wet to dry. It transitions. The nervous system often settles in the same way. After a period of cognitive demand, residual activity remains. Now let's continue. Muscles retain some tone. The mind predicts another interruption because interruptions were common earlier. Peace develops as repeated quiet moments. Revise those expectations. Nothing follows the silence. Nothing new arrives. The body updates slowly. The mind updates slowly. And the gap between one thought and the next becomes slightly less crowded by preparation. There is no need to identify the precise moment when peace begins. By the time it is noticed, it may already have been developing for some time. Like mist thinning between trees, the change is easier to see after it has already happened. The forest is still damp. The questions of tomorrow still exist. But the immediate world has become simpler. And sometimes simplicity is enough for uncertainty to remain present without becoming urgent. When uncertainty can remain present without becoming urgent, the mind does not have to keep leaning into the future. This changes the texture of awareness. Much of ordinary thinking is perspective. The brain is constantly preparing for what may happen next. It estimates consequences, rehearses conversations, predicts outcomes, and keeps unfinished goals available. This forward-looking ability is one of the foundations of planning, but it also means that the present is often experienced partly through what has not happened yet. Peace can reduce that forward pull. The future does not disappear. It simply becomes less magnetically important. Quiet horizon just before night can have this quality. There is no obvious event approaching. The sky darkens slowly. The line between land and air becomes less distinct. A few clouds continue across the distance, but their movement is too gradual to create anticipation. Nothing in the scene suggests that the next minute will be fundamentally different from the current one. For the predictive brain, this continuity can be restful. Stable patterns reduce the need for frequent updating. They create a short stretch of time in which the recent past remains a good guide to the immediate future. This is part of why predictability and peace often overlap. Yet predictability alone is not enough. A highly demanding routine can be perfectly predictable and still feel exhausting. Peace depends not only on knowing what comes next, but on how much that next event requires. A repeated sequence becomes restful when it contains relatively little conflict, decision-making, or defensive preparation. This can be seen in familiar evening routines. The same objects are encountered in the same order. The same rooms are entered. The same lights are dimmed. The same quiet sounds begin to dominate. Because these cues have been experienced many times, the brain has fewer new questions to answer. Recognition reduces novelty, prediction reduces uncertainty, and repetition can gradually signal that active problem-solving is becoming less relevant. These learned associations are not mystical. They are ordinary features of memory. The nervous system learns relationships between contexts and what usually follows them. A particular room may become associated with reading. A certain desk may become associated with concentrated work. A familiar kitchen may bring eating-related expectations into awareness. And a repeated nighttime setting may become associated with reduced activity and sleep. The effect is often subtle. A person may enter a familiar bedroom and feel the pace of the evening change before consciously thinking about sleep. Lighting, temperature, smell, sound, and spatial arrangement can all contribute to contextual memory. The brain recognizes not only individual objects, but patterns among them. A combination of dim light, familiar bedding, low noise, and reduced movement may become a learned signal that very little new information is expected. This is one reason consistency can sometimes feel peaceful, even when the environment itself is not especially luxurious. Peace does not require perfection. A room can contain an old chair, imperfect walls, distant sounds, and changing shadows. If those features are known and non-demanding, they may be easier for the brain to leave in the background than unfamiliar features in a more polished setting. Familiarity helps, but peace remains broader than familiarity. A familiar environment can contain obligations. A familiar voice can bring anticipation. A familiar routine can become stressful if it is associated with performance. Peace appears when familiarity is joined by low immediate demand. The nervous system recognizes the pattern and also recognizes that little has to be done about it. Memory can make natural environments feel similar. A person who has repeatedly heard rain while resting may develop strong associations between that sound and quiet evenings. Someone who has spent peaceful time near water may find the slow pattern of waves especially settling. A particular kind of wind through trees may carry a sense of continuity because it has accompanied many uneventful moments before. These associations can be powerful, but they are personal. Rain is not universally peaceful. Ocean sounds are not universally peaceful. Forests are not universally peaceful. The brain does not respond to a category called nature in exactly the same way for everyone. It responds to experience. Current state matters too. When attention is already overloaded, even a normally pleasant environment can feel like too much information. When the mind has gradually settled, the same environment can feel spacious. This variability is important because peace is not a simple property of a place. It is a relationship between a nervous system and its surroundings. A landscape becomes peaceful when the person perceiving it can stop treating its details as demands. A room becomes peaceful when its signals become easy to interpret and easy to ignore. A thought becomes peaceful when its existence no longer forces another thought to follow. This relationship can shift from hour to hour. Sound that disappears into the background one night may attract attention another night. A familiar room may feel spacious on one evening and mentally crowded on another. The external conditions may be almost identical. The difference lies partly in what the brain is carrying into them. Recent demands influence perception. Fatigue influences regulation. Expectations influence interpretation. Memory changes significance. Peace, therefore, cannot be engineered with perfect precision. It can be supported by conditions, but not commanded. This is one reason trying to reproduce a peaceful experience exactly may sometimes fail. The same music is played, the same light is used, the same room is arranged in the same way, yet the feeling is different. The nervous system is never returning to precisely the same starting point. Every peaceful moment is partly new. This does not make peaceful environments unreliable. It makes peace dynamic. The brain continuously updates. What mattered yesterday may not matter today. What seemed unfinished earlier may have lost relevance. What once required monitoring may have become familiar enough to fade. This ability to update is part of resilience. Resilience is sometimes described too simply as staying unaffected by difficulty. A more useful view is the capacity to regain flexibility after activation. The nervous system can become alert when alertness is useful, then gradually stop investing in that state when circumstances change. Returning matters more than never leaving. Calm lake after wind shows this gently. For some time after the air has become still, small waves continue crossing the surface. They carry the momentum of conditions that are no longer present. Then the waves become shorter. Reflections become clearer. The shoreline appears less broken. Nothing forces the water into stillness. The energy simply dissipates because nothing new is adding to it. Human recovery often follows a similar pattern. A thought continues after its usefulness is ended. A muscle remains tense after effort is over. Attention checks once more, even though there is nothing new to find. Then, if no additional demand arrives, the old momentum begins to weaken. What remains is not emptiness. There is still movement, still perception, still thought, but increasingly, the present stops inheriting every demand from the moments that came before it. When the present stops inheriting every demand from the moments that came before it, the nervous system gains something easy to overlook, a chance to update its estimate of the world. The brain does not respond only to what is happening now. It also responds to what it expects to happen next. And those expectations are shaped by what has happened recently. If an afternoon has been filled with interruptions, the brain may continue anticipating interruption after the interruptions have stopped. If many decisions have been required, the mind may continue preparing to make another one. If attention has spent hours moving rapidly between tasks, it may keep searching for the next target even when the environment becomes quiet. This lingering expectation is not a mistake. Prediction is one of the ways the nervous system remains efficient. Instead of approaching every moment as completely new, the brain uses recent experience to estimate what is likely to follow. But it also means that peace can arrive more slowly than the peaceful conditions themselves. A quiet room may become quiet in a second. The brain may take much longer to believe it. This gradual updating is a form of learning. Minute after minute, the surroundings provide evidence. The light remains steady. The same faint sound continues in the distance. No new conversation begins. Nothing requires a quick decision. No sudden task appears. The immediate future keeps resembling the recent past. Eventually, the expectation of interruption becomes less useful. Attention no longer needs to remain positioned so close to the next possible event. This is one reason repeated, peaceful experiences can matter. The nervous system learns from patterns, not only from explanations. A person may understand perfectly well that an evening is free of obligations, yet still feel mentally active. Knowledge alone does not instantly change every physiological and attentional process. Repeated experience supplies another kind of information. There was time to sit quietly yesterday, and nothing urgent happened. There was a familiar period of low stimulation the evening before, and the world remained manageable. The same room, the same dim light, the same ordinary background sounds appeared again. Over time, predictability can become embodied. This does not mean that routines permanently train the brain into peace. Human states remain flexible, and the same routine can feel different under different circumstances. But repetition reduces uncertainty, and reducing uncertainty can reduce the amount of checking required. The body participates in this learning as well. A shoulder that has remained slightly tense may soften only after several quiet minutes. The jaw may loosen without conscious notice. Breathing may become more regular because speech, movement, and anticipation are decreasing. The body is not receiving a command to relax. It is simply no longer receiving as many reasons to prepare. This distinction is important because preparation is not always dramatic. The eyes may remain a little more active. Posture may be slightly more rigid. Attention may turn toward every small sound. The mind may continue maintaining unfinished plans and working memory. None of this necessarily feels like strong stress. It can simply feel like not quite being at rest. Peace often develops through the disappearance of these small forms of readiness. One by one, they become unnecessary. The visual field becomes easier to leave unattended. Sounds lose their ability to pull attention. The body stops rehearsing movement. Thoughts become less tightly connected to action. A useful contrast appears here between peace and emotional numbness. In numbness, experience may feel reduced, distant, or difficult to access. Peace does not require that reduction. In fact, peaceful states can sometimes make perception more vivid. When the brain is no longer concentrating on an urgent objective, small sensory details may become easier to notice. The coolness of air near an open window, the texture of fabric beneath one hand, the faint reflection of moonlight on a floor, the almost inaudible movement of leaves outside. These details were not absent earlier. they were simply less relevant. Reduced vigilance can give ordinary perception more room. This is another reason peace can feel spacious rather than blank. Awareness widens without becoming empty. There may be more room for color, sound, memory, and bodily sensation precisely because fewer of those experiences are being classified as problems. A thought about tomorrow can sit beside the sound of rain. A memory can coexist with the feeling of warmth in the hands. Experience becomes less competitive. Scientists studying emotion increasingly emphasize that healthy regulation is not simply a matter of reducing emotional intensity. Regulation also involves flexibility, matching responses to circumstances, and allowing those responses to change when circumstances change. A nervous system that never becomes activated would not be well regulated. Neither would one that remains activated long after activation has stopped being useful. Peace belongs to the recovery side of this flexibility. It is evidence, at least for a time, that the system has been able to revise its priorities. The same principle applies to thought. Not every problem deserves equal access to every hour. Some questions become more useful when daylight returns. Some uncertainties cannot be reduced by thinking about them for another 20 minutes. The ability to postpone cognitive work is not the same as forgetting or avoiding it. It is a form of temporal organization. The brain can allow a question to remain stored without keeping it actively open. When that happens, working memory becomes less crowded. The problem still exists, but at a greater distance. Imagine fog resting over a broad valley at night. The hills have not disappeared. They are still there beneath the darkness, but their edges have softened. Details that were sharp in daylight are no longer available. The landscape has become less demanding, not because it contains less reality, but because less of that reality requires inspection. A peaceful mind can resemble this. Responsibilities remain, memories remain, uncertainty remains, but their edges are less sharp. They do not all need to be examined at once. And in that softer arrangement, the brain can remain awake without holding the whole world at the same level of importance. And when the whole world no longer needs to be held at the same level of importance, peace becomes less like a special experience and more like a temporary absence of unnecessary demand. The brain is still active. Memory continues to move quietly through familiar pathways. Sensory systems continue to receive information. The body continues regulating temperature, circulation, breathing, digestion, and posture. Thoughts may still arise without invitation, but fewer of these events are being treated as urgent. This distinction is especially important near sleep. Sleep does not begin because the brain has successfully eliminated thought. It begins while the brain is still functioning. The transition involves changing priorities. External information becomes less dominant. Muscles require less readiness. Attention becomes less tightly attached to the environment. The mind becomes less concerned with maintaining a precise account of what is happening from moment to moment. Sleep pressure has been accumulating throughout wakefulness, partly through biological processes linked with time spent awake. At the same time, the circadian system is moving through its own nighttime pattern. Under ordinary dark conditions, biological signals increasingly support sleep rather than sustained daytime alertness. None of these processes creates peace by itself, but peaceful surroundings can stop adding unnecessary demands while those biological transitions are already unfolding. A dark room does not need to persuade the brain to sleep. It only contains less visual information. Steady nighttime sounds do not have to produce relaxation. They simply provide fewer unexpected changes. Familiar bed does not switch off vigilance. It is a known environment, one that may have been experienced many times without requiring much action. Together, these conditions can make continued monitoring less worthwhile, and monitoring is costly. To keep watching, the brain has to maintain predictions. To keep solving, it has to maintain problems. To keep controlling, it has to maintain differences between how things are and how they are supposed to become. Peace reduces some of those differences. For a while, the present does not have to become anything else. There may still be an unfinished task somewhere beyond the room. There may still be a conversation waiting for another day. There may be plans that remain uncertain, and questions without final answers. They have not disappeared. They have simply stopped occupying the nearest part of attention. That may be enough. Outside, water lies beneath the dark sky. The surface is not perfectly still. A faint movement passes through it, changing the reflection of distant light. Then another small movement follows. Nothing needs to be predicted from either one. Farther away, the horizon has almost disappeared. Water and sky have become similar shades of blue-gray, separated by a line that is still present, but no longer sharply defined. The brain often moves toward sleep through a similar softening of boundaries. Thoughts become less organized around clear beginnings and endings. One idea may blend into another. A memory may appear without its full context. A fragment of an imagined place may briefly feel more interesting than the room itself. This does not mean awareness is failing. It is part of the gradual transition away from tightly controlled waking cognition. The need for coherence becomes weaker. A thought does not always have to finish. A mental image does not have to make sense. Tension no longer has to return every time it drifts. Peace, at this point, may be almost indistinguishable from permission for things to remain incomplete. Not deliberate permission, not an instruction. Simply the absence of another demand insisting that everything be settled. Even the body can remain slightly imperfect. Breathing does not have to follow an ideal rhythm. The heart does not need to reach a particular rate. The shoulders do not have to become completely loose. Sleep has never required physiological perfection. The nervous system only needs enough evidence that continued readiness is unnecessary, and that evidence can be very ordinary. The same room, the same darkness, a predictable sound, a stable temperature, nothing new appearing, another minute passing without requiring action, then another. Repeated quiet is information. The brain learns from it. Nothing happened that required defending against. Nothing appeared that needed solving. No important signal was missed. The environment continued without intervention. With each uneventful interval, monitoring can become slightly less valuable. This may be one reason peace often arrives indirectly. The moment it is examined too closely, it becomes another object of attention. Is the mind peaceful now? Has the body settled enough? Is sleep beginning? These questions recreate monitoring. But peace itself does not require confirmation. It can exist without being measured. A person can be peaceful without knowing the exact moment it happened. Just as a lake becomes still without announcing when the final noticeable ripple disappeared. There may have been one small movement, then another smaller one. Then the surface simply became difficult to distinguish from stillness. The nervous system can settle this way. Not through a dramatic transition. Not through complete silence. Not through the disappearance of every thought, only through fewer reasons to continue preparing. The rain outside becomes softer. A few drops still reach the roof, spaced farther apart now. Somewhere beyond the room, leaves move once in a weak current of air. Then they are quiet again. The sounds are still present. They no longer seem to be arriving. They are simply part of the night. A distant reflection moves across dark water. Clouds continue traveling slowly overhead. Even though their motion is almost impossible to see, the body continues its own quiet work. The heart adjusts from beat to beat. Breathing continues without supervision. Temperature is maintained. Memory remains available. The brain is not switched off. It has simply begun to release its interest in everything that does not matter right now. And perhaps this is one of the simplest scientific ways to understand peace. Not as emptiness, not as perfect calm, not as permanent safety, silence, comfort, certainty, or happiness, but as a temporary state in which experience is allowed to continue without producing another immediate requirement. A thought may come. Nothing has to follow it. A sound may appear. Nothing has to be checked. A question may remain unfinished. Nothing has to answer it tonight. The water remains dark. The horizon remains quiet. The room contains very little movement, and somewhere inside all that ordinary continuing activity, the brain has fewer and fewer reasons to stay on guard.